Are you tired of losing to expensive creatures like Consecrated Sphinx, Craterhoof Behemoth, and Ulamog the Infinite Gyre? Well, now you can play those creatures too, and all on only a $25 budget. Our commander for this deck is Tishana, Voice of Thunder, but our overall strategy won't actually rely on her at all. Our strategy for this deck is to let our opponents play big creatures, and then we get multiple copies of those creatures, usually for less mana. Tishana is simply there to refill her hand when we run out of clones. Tishana is an XX for 5 green blue that reads, when Tishana enters the battlefield, we draw a card for each creature we control. She also gives us no maximum hand size, and her power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in her hand. Tishana is a great way to ensure that we never run out of cards, because although we can't have multiple of her on the field, we can make our clones a copy of her for long enough to draw the cards. Now that we've gotten the commander out of the way, let's head on to the main strategy of our deck, the Clone Troopers. These are the cards that will allow us to gain copies of other creatures on the board. For starters, we have Clone, Gigantoplasm, and Vizier of Many Faces. Clone comes in as a copy of any creature on the battlefield for just 3 and a blue. Gigantoplasm is a strictly better clone for the same cost that also allows us to pay X in order to make his base power and toughness X until the end of the turn. Vizier is a clone for 2 blue blue that also has Embalm for 3 blue blue, making him reusable after he dies. Next up we have Altered Ego, Vesuvian Shapeshifter, and Mirror Image. Altered Ego is a clone for X 2 green blue that enters with the number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to X. Vesuvian Shapeshifter is our most mana intensive clone at 3 blue blue, but also has the ability to morph every turn for just 1 and a blue, allowing us to change what it's copying every turn if we choose to do so. Mirror Image is our cheapest clone at just 2 and a blue, but can only come in as a creature we control. With the creatures out of the way, let's head on to the instant sorceries that will give us copies. First up is Quasi-Duplicate. Quasi-Duplicate gives us a token copy of a creature we control for 1 blue blue, and it also has Jumpstart, allowing us to cast it from the graveyard once by discarding a card in addition to paying its mana cost. Repudiate/Replicate gives us the option of either countering an activated or triggered ability for a green and a blue, or getting a token copy of a creature we control for 1 green blue. The Repudiate half of this card is great for countering abilities of our opponent's creatures that could kill us, but the Replicate half is what solidifies its place in this deck. We also have Cackling Counterpart, which for 1 blue blue also gives us a token copy of a creature we control, but unlike Quasi-Duplicate and Replicate allows us to do it at instant speed. It also has Flashback for 5 blue blue. Tempt with Reflections allows us to pay 3 and a blue in order to get a token copy of a creature we control, and an additional copy for each other player who decides to take one as well. Stolen Identity gives us a token copy of any creature or artifact on the field for 4 blue blue, but also ciphers onto a creature we control, meaning that we will hopefully get multiple uses out of it before the game is done. And Spitting Image gives us a token copy of any creature on the field for 4 Simic, and has Retrace, meaning that we can cast it from our graveyard as many times as we want as long as we have a land to discard in addition to paying its mana cost. And for our final roundup of clones, we have Saheeli's Artistry, which for 4 blue blue gives us a token copy of a creature or artifact, or both, giving us tremendous value for our mana. Metamorphic Alteration is an aura that says enchanted creature is a copy of another creature, which means that we can play it on our own creatures in order to turn them into something more valuable, or onto one of our opponent's creatures as a piece of removal. And last but not least, we have Clone Legion. Clone Legion says that for 7 blue blue, we get a token copy of every creature target player controls. 9 mana may seem like a lot, but it's actually a low cost to pay for the tremendous value that this card holds. This card played in the right situation could take us from last place to first in a matter of seconds. Next up we have, Hey, that's mine! These are a group of cards that allow us to steal cards from our opponents, because sometimes we don't want them to have something, but we do. First off, we have Control Magic and Persuasion, both of which are auras that read, You control enchanted creature, for a measly 4 and 5 mana respectively. Confiscate costs 4 blue blue, but allows us to enchant any permanent in order to gain control of it. Dreamleash and Bolus's Clutches do the same thing, but Dreamleash requires the permanent be tapped, and Bolus's Clutches makes it legendary if it wasn't already. Aether Snatch isn't an aura, but reads, Gain control of target spell, we may choose new targets for it. This can turn our opponent's game-winning cards into our game-winning cards instead. Next up, we have a segment called Draw the Line. After playing so many clones and controls, we'll need a couple ways to replenish our hands so that we can do it all again. First up is Shamanic Revelation, which for 3 green green draws a card for each creature we control, and we also gain 4 life for each creature we control with power 4 or greater. This will not only refill our hand, but will gain us a ton of life on numerous occasions. Biomantic Mastery draws us a card for each creature the target player controls, and then we do it again for another player. This can draw us twice as many cards as Shamanic Revelation for just 2 more mana at 4 Simic. Soul's Majesty draws us cards equal to the power of target creature we control for just 4 and a green. We also have Soul of the Harvest, who is a 6/6 with Trample for 4 green, who draws us a card whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, and Runic Armasaur will draw us a card whenever an opponent uses a non-mana ability of a creature or land for just 1 green. Both of these are great because we can clone them in order to double the amount of draw they give us. Arcanist Downly Potent isn't clonable since he's legendary, but he'll still give us plenty of draw power, being able to tap to draw 3 for just 3 blue. We'll get a lot of value out of him. We can't always rely on our opponents having creatures worth using our clones on, which is why we're also running our own big creatures that we can get copies of. We have Icefall Regent, Duplicate, and Phyrexian Ingester, which all act as a clonable source of removal. Icefall Regent says that for 3 blue, we get a 4/3 flying dragon who taps down a creature when it enters the battlefield, and it doesn't untap for as long as we control Icefall Regent. Our opponent's spells that target him also cost 2 more to cast. Duplicate and Phyrexian Ingester both exile a creature when they enter, and both get bigger depending on the creature they exile. Jace's Mindseeker, Diluvian Primordial, and Sower of Temptation are all clonable creatures that allow us to play our opponent's cards. Jace's Mindseeker is a 4/4 flyer for 4 blue that mills one of our opponents for 5 and then allows us to cast an instant or sorcery from those 5 for free. Diluvian Primordial costs 5 blue and allows us to cast an instant or sorcery from each of our opponent's graveyards when it enters the battlefield. Sower of Temptation costs a measly 2 blue and takes control of a creature when it enters the battlefield until Sower leaves the battlefield. Verdant Sun's Avatar costs 5 green and gains its life whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, equal to that creature's toughness. Having multiple copies of Verdant Sun's Avatar adds up fast, gaining us more life than we'll know what to do with. Tempest Caller taps all of target player's creatures when it enters the battlefield for just 2 blue, making it a great clone target when we need to go for the kill. Scourge of Fleets costs 5 blue and returns all of our opponent's creatures to their hands with toughness equal to or less than the number of islands we control. This is a great clone target as it keeps our opponent's creatures in check without actually affecting ours at all. Archaeomancer returns an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand for the cost of 2 blue. Augury Owl only costs 1 and a blue, but gives us a 1/1 flyer that scries 3 when it enters the battlefield. This is great for the early game when it's crucial we get the pieces we need. Hydra Omnivore is an 8/8 for 4 green that says when it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to every other opponent as well, meaning that having multiple copies of him can take out all of our opponents quickly just by attacking the weakest link. Reclamation Sage and Trigon Predator are both 3-drops that help us keep our opponent's artifacts and enchantments in check and can be copied to get even more value out of them. And finally, we have 4 creatures that, while they can be cloned, don't provide much of a benefit in doing so. Archetype of Imagination gives our creatures flying and ensures their opponent's creatures don't, allowing us to go in for the kill. Djinn of Infinite Deceits is a fun card that lets us swap around non-legendary creatures. Thought Courier is a good early game creature for fixing our hand. And Omnispell Adept lets us cast our sorceries at instant speed and oftentimes for less mana. Ramping up. Most of our ramp is creature-based, as that allows us to copy them if we find ourselves falling behind on mana. To start off with, we have Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, and Green Weaver Druid, all of which are elves that will tap to give us green mana. Next up is Weaver of Currents, Palladia-Myr, and Gyre Engineer, all of which are 3-drops that tap for 2 mana. And lastly, we have Worn Powerstone and Simic Signet. Worn Powerstone costs us 3 but taps for 2, and Simic Signet gives us great color fixing for just 2 mana. Removal. A lot of the time we are fine with our opponents getting out big creatures, as it means that we can copy them, but sometimes we need to get rid of our opponent's creatures. Curse of the Swine, Beast Within, and Lignify all help us get rid of pesky creatures. Curse of the Swine costs X blue and exiles X target creatures and replaces them with 2/2 tokens. This allows us to remove multiple creatures with 1 spell. Beast Within can get rid of any permanent at instant speed for only 2 and a green, but that player gets a 3/3 token in return. And Lignify is an aura that makes the enchanted creature a 0/4 Treefolk. This is great for getting rid of commanders, as they can't just be sent back to the command zone to be cast again. Sometimes we'll just have to do everything we can to survive, and these next cards will help us to do so. We have Aetherize, Aetherspouts, and Respite, all of which ensure that our opponent's attacking creatures don't hit us. Aetherize returns all attacking creatures to the hand for 3 and a blue, while Aetherspouts puts them on the top or bottom of the deck for just 1 blue mana more. Respite only costs 1 and a green and prevents all combat damage until the end of the turn, and gains us 1 life for each attacking creature. Insidious Will, Disallow, and Counterspell all ensure that we have an answer to our opponent's game-ending cards, and Insidious Will also allows us to copy instant sorceries, so that we too can join in on the fun. Rapid Vigor saves our creatures from board wipes by regenerating all of them for just 1 and a green. Reigns of Power is a game-winning card, allowing us to switch creatures with another player until the end of the turn for just 2 blue-blue. This can be used to prevent game-ending combat damage to us, or allows us to attack for the game using someone else's creatures. Our final segment is Land Ho. For our non-basic lands in this deck, we are simply running Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse. As far as basics go, 16 Forests and 17 Islands will do the trick. That brings us to 100 cards and ends our deck list, so let's see what the final price is. The prices for this deck came from TCG Player and ended up being a total of $23.87, staying well within our $25 budget. However, a deck can always be improved on, so let's look at a few cards that I recommend to make this deck even better. First off, we have Regal Behemoth. Regal Behemoth doubles our mana for 4 green as long as we are the Monarch. Regal Behemoth is great in this deck because we can clone him to double our mana even further, and cloning him makes us the Monarch again, ensuring that we always have plenty of mana in our deck. Rite of Replication gives us a token copy of any creature on the field for just 2 blue-blue, but can be kicked for 5 in order to gain 5 tokens instead. This is a lot like Clone Legion, and just like Clone Legion, will win us the game if played at the right time. Clever Impersonator is a clone that can come in as any permanent on the field rather than just a creature. Progenitor Mimic costs 4 green-blue and comes in as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. He also reads, at the beginning of our upkeep, we get another token copy of him if he is not a token himself. This means that every turn we'll get another copy of whatever creature he's copying, but it also means that if we clone him, then the clones will also give us more token copies every turn, meaning that he'll get out of hand fast. Mirage Mirror is an artifact for 3 that allows us to pay 2 to turn it into any other creature, artifact, enchantment, or land until the end of the turn. Mirage Mirror is just a great overall card in any commander deck. And lastly, we have Heroic Intervention, which is a great card for keeping our creatures safe, as for just 1 and a green, it gives all of our creatures hexproof and indestructible until the end of the turn. It's another great card to have in any EDH deck. That concludes this budget deck tech. I hope you all have fun playing your opponent's decks and beating them with their own creatures. Have any suggestions for this deck? Be sure to comment down below so that others can know about them too. Be sure to check out my other videos for more fun and cheap decks released every week. That's all for now. Gatherer's Gauntlet, signing out.